Mix in the Dark.
Hey, what's up? It's MaiYang from Mix in the Dark. If you're listening to this episode, you're probably trying to figure out how to grow your podcast. I am definitely not an expert at this, but I will give you advice based on what has worked for me. This episode is meant to discuss tips and personal advice for new content owners who are done with their planning and are ready for their first episode release. These are the few things that I learned while developing my podcast. The first thing that I want to tell you as a content creator is that you are going to plan when all you really need to do is just start and release. That was me in August 2020. I wasn't sure what I was doing and I was super insecure about releasing my work publicly. I showed my first recorded episode to just about everyone I knew and I was really scared to put it out. Finally, my sister-in-law encouraged me to make that upload happen and all she did was say, just release it tomorrow. I did as I was told. I love scary stories, but that was probably the most scared I had been in a while. Just know that yes, it is scary to put your voice out there, but everything is going to be okay as long as you stay authentic. Here are my 5 tips for new podcast owners based on personal learning, so take what you need and trash what you don't. Number 1 is find listeners who genuinely enjoy your work. To me, the first 30 days of your podcast releasing its first episode is the most important. You get a chance to let people know all about your new podcast and what it will cover. Your first podcast must leave a good impression on your first-time listeners. You must find a way to get people to talk about your podcast to others and engage them enough so that they do want to come back and keep listening. At the beginning of my podcast journey, I basically forced everyone I knew to go subscribe to me on YouTube and to go add my podcast to their podcasting apps. I quickly learned that these subscribers are not my supporters. They are not interested. They're not interested in me, and they're probably not going to come back. Suddenly, the number of subscribers didn't really matter to me anymore. I focused my energy on people who actually enjoyed listening to me. I checked my comments and stats daily to see what kind of scary story topics listeners liked more, and I began to cater to that. A successful podcast to me means that you have a consistent flow of people listening to you and coming back. Number 2 is stay consistent. This one is pretty straightforward. Plan your episode release days and commit. Ask yourself, how often are you going to release? What day will you release? What time will you release? How long are your episodes going to be? People appreciate consistency so that they know when to come back and listen to you. I noticed that Mix in the Dark listeners get thrown off when I miss a week, and I super appreciate you welcoming me back every time. Number 3 is network with other podcast owners. This one is so important. It is so important to connect with podcast owners who have similar content to yours and to work with them. You learn a lot when you put a few brains together, but you learn even more when you work with someone who has been in the industry longer than you. I am a big fan of Lengva from California. He tells scary stories in Hmong. I am also a fan of Tales from the Abyss. He tells scary stories in English. I knew I wanted to work with them, so I figured out a way to collaborate with them. I made sure that I did all of the work and that they did the minimum. If you want others to work with you, you need to make that opportunity happen and meet them 3/4 of the way. You plan and initiate the collaboration. You cannot just sit and hope that people will come and find you and work with you. I have a pretty good following now, and I still find ways to work with others, such as appearing as a guest with Ramanisk, and recently 2 new podcast owners to be. This is just me personally, but I feel so happy when I connect and work with other podcast owners and YouTube content creators because no one else knows the work that you put in more than them. It is so refreshing and exciting to have conversations about it and exchange tips to help each other grow. But again, this is just me. Number 4 is learn how to monetize. One question that I had when I started Mix in the Dark was, how do I know if my podcast is doing okay, or how do I know if I totally suck? I Googled a bunch of things during that time and made goals knowing those stats. I won't explain them here, but I will put the information below in the description. So when I started Mix in the Dark, my goal was really simple. I wanted 500 downloads on podcasting platforms and to reach 1,000 subscribers on YouTube by the end of my second month so that I can be at least top 50% of most listened to podcasts and be able to start monetizing. I am going to talk about monetizing on podcast stations first. Every podcast hosting platform is a little different. I have Buzzsprout, so I will speak toward my experience with Buzzsprout and monetizing. Buzzsprout partners with Podcorn, which is a place where podcasters and potential sponsors connect. I'm going to be honest with you that this is something that I just started to explore and am still learning. So if you're someone who knows a lot more about this, please help a girl out. This is how it works though. You get a list of sponsorships available and basically you search and apply for ones that could work with your podcast. Most times the sponsors will ask you for the number of downloads you have had in the past 30 days and the amount you want them to pay you. The amount you put should depend on your number of downloads and how much work you will put in the advertisement. Some sponsors will ask you to place an interview as an ad. Others may ask you for a pre-recorded blurb as an ad. Then they ask you what days you will put their ad on. They might rehire you and ask you to place it in multiple episodes, or it may just be a one-time opportunity that you place in just one episode. For pre-recorded ads in the beginning or middle of your episode, the payment may range from $15 to $40 per episode, depending on the number of downloads you have. Interviews with your sponsors can range from a few bucks to a few $100, depending on how much work you have put into that advertisement. And then again, it also depends on the number of downloads your podcast has. This helps determine your payment. I can't stress enough that the number of your podcast downloads is super important when you are trying to monetize on podcasting platforms. Currently, Myxinthedark is the top 10% of most listened podcast stations. This is only possible because I had genuine listeners, and you only get genuine listeners if you keep releasing content. Don't be discouraged. I only had 60 downloads my first week of uploading my very first episode. Now I get about 1,500 downloads per episode, and you can definitely do that too. Next, I will cover monetizing your podcast station on YouTube. YouTube was much more straightforward for me. You need 1,000 subscribers and 4,000 watched minutes within a 12-month time frame in order to be eligible for monetization. The statistical average that a person will reach 1,000 subscribers is 22 months. Well, I'm here to tell you that it's very possible to reach that 1,000 subscribers even sooner. You need to network though. You need to work with other YouTubers to help you get there. It's not easy getting to 1,000 subscribers, but when you do, everything becomes so much easier. I reached 1,000 subscribers within 2 months with the help of 2 scary storytellers that I trust and admire. I am truly so thankful for them in guiding the development of MixInTheDark. To me, monetizing is the easy part. Making money is the hard part. It all depends on the number of views per video and the number of views per advertisement on your video. The average earned is about 20 cents per advertisement watched. It doesn't sound pretty to say that earning money depends on your genuine listeners, but it really does. This is why I am so type A personality about my episodes. My listeners are giving me their time, so I make sure I am giving them quality or the best that I can give. Also, you know that terms and conditions section where we all like to scroll past and we just press agree? Read that thing and actually figure out what you can or cannot put out there. You don't want to get flagged for something just because you did not read your terms and conditions. I recommend you keep your podcast episodes clean. What I mean is use none to very little swear words, or look up what words are okay to say on your hosting stations. YouTube is pretty strict. They do checks on your uploads to make sure that you're not breaking any rules or stealing music. These things might put limitations on your monetization. If your episodes are not clean, good luck getting monetized on YouTube. Number 5 to me is the most important. It is to stay true to your podcast goals. Write down your podcast goals and objectives and stick to it. Any content made public, just remember that it will get criticism, okay? You got to tell yourself that it's okay for someone to not like your work. It is your job to know the difference between constructive criticisms that will help your podcast grow versus pickiness, which is someone just picking out tiny things that bothers only them. So for example, when I first started, I had a lot of criticism on my choice of language that I told these stories in. People wanted me to tell these stories in Hmong and not English because it's just not what they're used to. But I have a goal with Myxinthedark. Its goal is to educate and explore the paranormal across different cultures and ethnicities. I stuck to it, and so far I love where it's going. The last thing that I want to say is to give yourself some grace in all of this. Your very first episode is really just you trying to figure out this podcasting thing. I didn't develop my podcast voice until a year later. If you compare my most current episode to my very first episode, you will hear two very different voices. It takes a while to build your podcast station's identity. I truly hope that this was helpful. I am here for you if you need me. I do not know everything, and I am still very new to all of this, but I like learning, and I like learning with people who have the same interests. So feel free to ask me questions. I will try my best to answer them, and as always, if it is a question that I do not have an answer for, then we can find out together. Thanks for listening once again, and good luck to you all. Thank you for listening to MixintheDark. I am your host, MaiYang. MixintheDark is available on Spotify, Apple Podcast, or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast series. If you have a story that you would like to share, please send it to myxinthedark@gmail.com. If there's a story that you really enjoyed, feel free to hit up my tip jar on Venmo. Just search MixintheDark on the business tab.